Tonight, looking back at 20 years of democracy.
I, Nelson Mandela, do hereby swear to be faithful to the Republic of South Africa.
A story of true transformation and integration.
We are integrated concerning our religions, cultures, races, and we live a happy life in Ruiterwacht.
And we take a look at how history unfolded 20 years ago on this day. De Klerk and Mandela were in tough negotiations to stabilize the situation in KwaZulu-Natal. Well, a very good evening and welcome to Democracy 20, a show that promises to look at progress made and challenges that have faced South Africa for the past 20 years. Now, the show will track transformation of our society, and to kick things off tonight, we'll be looking back to the legacy of the country's first democratically elected president and how he spearheaded reconciliation. Now, that's the late former President Nelson Mandela, of course, who was a key figure in the creation of a democratic South Africa. There were a number of special highlights during his presidency.
They leave the Victor Verster prison.
Mandela's release from prison after 27 years of incarceration marked the beginning of a very difficult period to end the apartheid system. He was at the center of a series of sensitive negotiations between 1990 and 1993, from the Groote Minutes to CODESA, which sought to manage the transition from apartheid to a multi-party democracy. Negotiations took place against a backdrop of horrific political violence in the country, including the Boipatong massacre in 1992, where more than 40 people were killed. Mandela won a Nobel Peace Prize in 1993 for his efforts to prevent a potential civil war. In the end, the complex four-year negotiation process resulted in South Africa's first multiracial election on the 27th of April 1994. Millions queued over a three-day voting period. Mandela also voted for the first time, casting his ballot at the Ohlange High School in Durban. Nelson Mandela was inaugurated as the first black president of South Africa after more than 3 centuries of white rule.
I, Nelson Mandela, do hereby swear to be faithful to the Republic of South Africa.
With 2 deputies, Thabo Mbeki and F.W. de Klerk, President Mandela presided over a government of national unity. His first major task was to lead the creation of a final constitution. It was finally adopted in 1996, and it limited the president to 2 consecutive 5-year terms. Mandela also had to preside over the delicate sunset clauses, a set of key political compromises and guarantees that sought to manage the transition from apartheid minority rule to democracy. While Mandela's government focused on repealing apartheid legislation, it also embarked on wide-ranging socio-economic interventions such as RDP houses for the poor and providing electricity in rural areas. He also persuaded the jittery multinational corporations to remain and invest in South Africa. Mandela also oversaw the formation of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission to investigate crimes committed under apartheid by both the government and the ANC. He was also involved in peace negotiations in the DRC, Burundi, as well as helping to break the diplomatic deadlock between Libya, the US, and Britain over the 1988 Lockerbie plane bombing. During his presidential years, Mandela entrusted his deputy Thabo Mbeki with the day-to-day business of government, while he concentrated on the ceremonial duties of a leader, such as reconciling the different races and building a new international image for South Africa. When the Springboks won an epic Rugby World Cup final against New Zealand in 1995, Mandela presented the trophy to the captain Francois Pienaar. This was widely seen as a major step in the reconciliation of white and black South Africans. Mandela also personally met with senior figures of the apartheid regime, including Hendrik Verwoerd's widow, Betsy Verwoerd, and the lawyer Percy Yuta. he won global respect and adulation for his reconciliation efforts.
The long walk continues. Ndlela ntle, mooi loop, tsela tshweu.
After just one term in office, Mandela stepped down as the country's president in 1999. He was succeeded by his deputy, Mbeki. But Mandela never rested nor retreated into retirement. He became South Africa's highest-profile ambassador, campaigning against HIV and AIDS, building schools in poor communities, and finally helping to secure this country's right to host the 2010 Soccer World Cup. Tammy Dixon, SABC News.
Now, there are various ways in which you at home can participate in tonight's program. You can send us your emails. This is at elections@sabc.co.za. I'll repeat that. Our email address is elections@sabc.co.za. Or you can send us SMSs. The number to send that to is 33726. And remember to begin your message with the word vote. And the SMSs cost R1.50 each. For tweets, if you're a social fundi like myself, hashtag SABC Elections, and you'll also find us on our Facebook page, that's SABC News Online. And do send us all your comments and anything you'd like to say or see on the show. Now, 2 decades ago, the suburb of Ruyterwacht near Cape Town became the focus of the new South Africa. It drew global attention when the residents of the then whites-only area vehemently resisted the enrollment of black children in a local school. This was shortly after South Africa's transition from an apartheid state to a constitutional democracy and the country's very first democratic elections. However, as Vanessa Puna reports, the past 20 years have brought significant changes to the area.
Developed as a residential area for low-income white South Africans in the 1930s, Ruyterwacht has over the past 2 decades become an integrated community. But poverty remains one of the major challenges.
I had a house, I lost it. Everybody had a nice life here, we could live. We could afford the rent. Now you get a pension. I'm waiting 19 years now for a place.
There are, however, signs of increasing affluence for some. Most of these residents who, after the abolition of apartheid, were able to buy houses in Ruyterwacht. The area was thrust into the spotlight in 1995. Racial relations were laid bare when black children tried to occupy a former whites-only school in the area. Residents vowed to keep them out. But that was then. 20 years on, a different picture emerges. At a local school in the area, children from different racial backgrounds learn side by side. A result, some believe, of the unmistakable Madiba magic.
Ruyterwacht was one of the first towns that Mr. Mandela visited after he became president of South Africa. He came specifically to Ruyterwacht to intervene in the process where learners were brought in from Khayelitsha and surrounds to the school that was here in Ruyterwacht, the old Ruyterwacht primary school. And he came to dissolve the situation where some of the citizens of Ruyterwacht were not satisfied, maybe feared of what is happening. And so that was a privilege to have him here, and that he came to make peace between the children, the learners who came in, as well as the people living in Ruyterwacht.
It's a true story of transformation and integration.
This community definitely changed. Where it initially was a whites-only community, after 94 it became integrated. People of other color came into Ruyterwacht, they bought houses, and I experienced that the integration went very well. Rather so that today I would say that nobody sees color. People are neighbors here, white, black, colored, Muslim people. We are integrated concerning our religions, cultures, races, and we live a happy life in Ruyterwacht.
And the residents share the sentiment.
I've got no problem with integration, as I've said just now. As long as people respect each other and they let the sun shine over other people, then it's fine to me. There's no problem with integration whatsoever.
An increase in crime is, however, a concern. This much evident in the measures taken to secure homes and other premises. But 20 years into South Africa's democracy, and despite the challenges facing this community, it appears that here the dream of a racially integrated and transformed community has indeed been realised. Vanessa Puna, SABC News, Reiterwacht.
Well, of course, at home we have been asking you to send us your tweets, and we already received one. This one is from Xolani Ngugazi. He says, well, at SABC News Online, that's exactly where you can get all of us. In fact, hashtag SABC News. We must forget about history, or I think it means we must not forget about history and build a bright future for the nation. Remember, hashtag SABC News. If you do want to send us your tweets, we'll keep them rolling throughout the show. Again, it's about your comments, what you like to know, what you like to say, and as far as the show is concerned, Democracy20, we continue to celebrate our heritage, our culture, our country. Stay tuned. We come back after this break.
When a man's an empty kettle, he should be on his mettle, and yet I'm torn apart. Just because I'm presuming that I could be kinda human if I only had a heart. I'd be friends with the sparrows and the boy who shoots the arrows if I only had a heart.
What time is it? It's question time.
The Jehovah's Witnesses, are you happy with corruption in the countries wherever you exist?
No.
But then that's a position. You are taking a stand against corruption.
We are actually proclaiming a better solution for corruption. The kingdom of God is actually going to bring righteousness across the country.
That's question time with me, Mpho Tsedu, Monday to Saturday, 5:30 p.m. on SABC News.
Democracy20. Well, if you've just joined us, you're watching a special program in which we celebrate 20 years of democracy in our country. The question is, how much better is South Africa really? That's one of the questions some of the country's foremost intellectuals had to grapple with recently. This during a panel discussion to mark the 50th anniversary of Lily's Leaf, the farm that was once the hideout of the ANC's underground operatives, among them, of course, Nelson Mandela and Walter Sisulu. Vuyo Mvoko caught up with two of the panelists on the day, Wits University's Vice-Chancellor, Professor Adam Habib, and struggle veteran, Dr. Paulo Jordan.
Dr. Jordan, a rhetorical question perhaps, but 20 years into democracy, are we on the right track?
Some years back, I wrote a paper in which I suggested that ours was an unfinished revolution. The suggestion there is that many aspects of our program have had to be deferred or were deferred because we thought it was more important to grab the beachhead of political power. Having done that, of course, you then take a particular route. And I think that's what Professor Habib is referring to when he says perhaps we're on the wrong road. Having deferred many things, other things take their place. You see, if you defer addressing the issue of migrant labor in the mines, you are deferring it, means it continues. Right? And it continues and it leads to Marikana. If you defer addressing the issue of extreme poverty amongst our people, it means that the informal settlements swell. Right? And because they are swelling, right, you then have your service delivery protests. If you defer an effective land reform program, it means that there is continuous movement from rural areas that are in decline into your urban areas. That, of course, compounds your housing problem. So deferment does sometimes lead to the objectives that you didn't want, and in directions which might well be detrimental. So I would say deferment has led to us putting off too many things which are resulting in bigger problems.
With the benefit of hindsight, would you say that that trade-off delivered, at the very least, something to hold on to that will take us forward?
No, it delivered a great deal. The political culture of South Africa is completely transformed. When you came here in 1990, 91, 92, 93 even, you might have thought that you were in Europe and Africans were just incidental to the politics of this country. Now, anyone knows that Africans are central to the politics of this country, and therefore you have to address the issues, aspirations, and problems faced by that particular community. They are central to South African politics today. Many other things have changed. When you think about the fact that our GDP has grown more than double in the 20 years, in a climate, mind you, internationally, of economic crisis, where we could have gone downhill. Many countries that were thought to be far better off than us have gone through the tube. South Africa has it. So there are many things we have achieved, but there is this problem that deferment has created for us.
And the big problem, Professor Habib, is?
Inequality. I think it's the fundamental question of our time. What we've done is we've achieved political democracy. We've achieved the deracialization of the public sphere. We've ensured that Africans are at the center of the political nexus. I think that all of that are great advances. But if we do not address inequality, we do not address the social polarization in our society, we do not address the tragedy of Marikana, and if we don't do that, it will come back to haunt us. And I think it's the fundamental question, how to fix inequality. I do think the NDP ducks that question. I think it talks about poverty alleviation. Although it says it wants to deal with inequality, it doesn't put in place the kinds of measures that will address inequality in our society.
But how? How do we fix the problem from where you sit?
Well, there's only one way to fix the problem. You can do all of the things that the NDP suggests, which is industrial targeting, employment, new entrepreneurs, small business development, and what that will do is get people at the bottom end of society to increase their life circumstances. But the people on the top will grow faster because they have assets, they have bonds, they have property, etc. The trick is to let these people grow faster than these people on the top, and that requires that we either have some controls on executive remuneration. CEOs, vice chancellors, politicians, cabinet ministers need to take lower increases than the people at the bottom end of society. I think that's one measure. I think tax is another measure. I think there are measures to try and provide loans from our development finance institutions to people in the informal sector. All of these are measures that will allow people at the bottom end to grow faster. But if we don't do that, we'll struggle as a society to achieve the ideals of the Freedom Charter.
Dr. Jordan, do you share this view that this, as Professor Habib has just said, is probably the best way to deal with the problem of inequality? In fact, do you agree whether inequality in the first instance is the single biggest problem confronting South Africa today?
Yes, I would say that is one of the big problems facing South Africa at present. If you think about just figures that were released recently. Last week, Stats South Africa released figures indicating that African and colored infants, most of them, grow up under conditions where there's no food security and all sorts of other terrible things like that. And at the other end of the social spectrum, you wouldn't find that. So those sorts of inequalities produce polarization in the society, which can be extremely dangerous because it provides a very volatile mix. Now, the question about how one addresses it perhaps is where differences might arise,
and what's
not
your
necessarily between myself and Professor Habib, but between myself and many other people. An interesting fact about the NDP is that it was released on the 15th of August, and the Marikana massacre happened on the 16th of August. That's a terrible indictment that the two things come together like that, you see, because they are interrelated. Not addressing the deferments and the issue of inequality which the NDP unfortunately does not do, is what produced Marikana. So the fact that they come one day after each other, I think that tells us a great deal.
Now, you've spoken a lot about the emphasis that is put on government, as if it is the only role player or where source from where solutions should come. What, in your view, should we be doing? Professor Habib suggests a, shall I call it what, social compact, where everybody comes together. You seemed to be having a bit of a problem with that.
Well, I don't have a problem with this idea of a social compact. I would very strongly urge a social compact. My problems with the social compact is it realizable at this point? And one of my issues has always been that, unfortunately, for the top echelons of our corporate elite, the majority of black people don't live in the same model universe as themselves, which is why you see a top executive in London can take a salary which 1,000 times higher than his lowest paid worker. And he doesn't see that person as part of the same moral universe as himself. How are you going to persuade him? No. Now you tone down your salary increases so that we... If you can do it, pожалуйста, but I doubt whether we're going to be able to do it until we bridge that issue.
Gentlemen, thanks to both of you, and thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Now, as we did at the top of the show, we've been asking you to send through your SMSs, emails and tweets. Let's take a look at some more of those tweets. Here's this one from Palisa Matabana. She says, history is what makes us who we are. We must not, well, in fact, we must learn from it. Hashtag SABC elections, as we've been asking you to do. Another one coming from Gerald Governor. He says, Nelson Mandela, what a man. Hashtag SABC elections. Please continue sending those through. We'll try, as the show goes on, to read every single one of them. If we don't, not be too sad. We'll try again on another day. But anyway, don't go away. After the break, we take a look at what happened in South Africa on this day 20 years ago. I think I was in supper around this time in high school, celebrating the democracy that we have right now. I think, yeah. What were you? Can you remember? Stay tuned. We'll find out after the break.
Good day and welcome to yet another evening of Afro Showbiz News. Kumba is a South African animated film that tells a story of a zebra who looks different.
It's about a zebra who's born with half his stripes, and he goes on a journey through the Karoo to find his stripes.
We've shown it to a few audiences at festivals around the world, and we've had really fantastic responses. So we're very excited to see what the South African population thinks of Kumba.
That's Afro Showbiz News, Saturdays 7:30 p.m. on SABC News.
With so many bad incidents happening around us, we continue sourcing, unpacking and televising nation-building and compassionate stories. From the nation's pride, those who go all out, top achievers, hard workers, those dedicated to making this country a better place, and unusual friendships. Catch all these and more on SABC News.
Across the globe, the continent and the entire country, every second there's always a breaking story. SABC News is your reliable eye, ear and information system in bringing you events as they happen. Our cutting-edge and hard-hitting journalism leaves no stone unturned, giving you the whole picture every time. Join us every day on SABC3 and know what is happening around you. SABC News, Africa's news leader.
Welcome back. You're still watching Democracy20, a special program in the run-up to the elections. Now, on this day 20 years ago, the country's first and historical general election was just more than a month away. Tensions ran high in the National Party government, and the ANC opted for route talks and negotiations to try and stabilize the situation in KwaZulu-Natal. This emerged after State President F.W. de Klerk and ANC leader Nelson Mandela held talks with members of the Independent Electoral Commission in Pretoria. The two leaders were briefed on the IEC talks in Ulundi.
The talks lasted for more than 3 hours, and when the two leaders emerged, they held separate news conferences. But both said that this was not an indication of different approaches to the KwaZulu issue. Reading between the lines, it seemed that Mr. Mandela was more keen on intervention in KwaZulu than Mr. de Klerk. But there appeared to be agreement that the first option was to reopen negotiations with IFP leaders and the Zulu King. When Mr. Mandela emerged, he looked somber. He said he could not divulge much details of what steps were being considered for KwaZulu.
On the security situation, because in our view, the political initiative which we should take in regard to Natal must be coordinated with measures as far as the military situation is concerned. I hope you'll appreciate that I cannot go into details as to precisely what steps it is proposed to take in this regard.
Referring to their briefing today with IEC Chairman Mr. Justice Johan Kriegler, Mr. de Klerk said the information given to them was more negative than initial reports. He said he was very disappointed about this. Mr. de Klerk then announced that another attempt would be made to enter into talks with Dr. Mangosuthu Buthelezi.
I would like to see him as soon as possible in order to take some of the matters affecting the holding of elections throughout KwaZulu-Natal, the availability of facilities, ensuring that it will be free and fair. I intend to take that up with him.
Mr. de Klerk did not want to be drawn into speculation about what other steps could be considered to stabilize the escalating violence and to ensure free political participation in KwaZulu-Natal.
And that's where we have to end tonight's program. Do join us again tomorrow evening at 6:30 right here on SABC3 and SABC News Channel 404 for another celebration of 20 years of democracy. Stay tuned. The 7 o'clock English news continue after this. You have yourself a good night.